All right, so thanks again for joining. My name is Vladimir Francis de Souza. I'm a pre-sales engineer here at the SD-WAN or VeloCloud part of VMware. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the VMware SD-WAN Orchestrator API. It's going to be a short overview, and we're going to go for a demo as well. So in terms of agenda, what we're going to cover today is really an introduction to what an API is and REST. We're going to see some API use cases in regards to SD-WAN and our orchestrator. We're going to go a bit deeper into the API, see how we authenticate the different methods, our API Explorer where we can get documentation, extremely high level overview of the VMware Orchestrator in regards to the API in this context. And then we're going to see how we can easily follow this API in the browser. And followed by that, I'm going to use Postman to demonstrate how you can actually use these APIs and how easily actually it is to start using it. So what is an API and why do we have this anyway, right? So this is going to be, again, for the entire presentation, an overview for non-developers, right? So the goal here is just to get an overview. It's not going to be an in-depth presentation, just to keep the expectations right. So anyway, an API stands for Application Programming Interface or Programmable Interface. And what it really is just a messenger or a way for two softwares to communicate, right? So the real goal here is to make sure we have a structured way of making requests and having a structured response. So APIs today are really everywhere. Every single, most of the devices, smartphones, machines, web servers, they have APIs. And the reason they do this is because you want to be able to talk to them in a simple way. So you know exactly how to get things from these machines or server, and you know exactly how to request them, and you should know exactly how it should look the response. So you can easily use this in a programmable fashion, right? If you want to automate things, that's the kind of structure you need. So a typical analogy we see here when you start reading or searching for APIs is this customer, waiter, and kitchen, right? So the customer doesn't need really to know to go to the kitchen and know how to order. He just know he needs food. You ask the waiter, the API in this case, it's going to deliver that request to the kitchen and get back that information. So it's basically this two pieces of software talking in a structured way. Now, what is REST, right? When you talk about API, you typically hear REST API. So REST is a architecture style for designing applications, right? So it stands for Representational State Transfer. And for the most, you're going to hear a lot about RESTful Web Service or RESTful Web APIs. And in the context of our orchestrator, that's what we're going to be working with. It's basically a web service that you can interact with an API. So these web APIs leverage HTTP as a protocol, right? It's a simple stateless client-server protocol, have very well-defined methods to get information, update information. So that's why, well, it's a very simple protocol to use. And in the case of the orchestrator, we only use POST, and we're gonna see that later. One remark I have to make, I will be exchanging the terms VCO and VMware SD-WAN Orchestrator, but they are basically the same, right? They used to be called VeloCloud Orchestrator. And again, the idea with this is HTTP is simple, right? It can be used by any language that can make those requests, Python, Java, Ruby, you name it. And that's one of the advantages of using these web APIs. And that's what we have in our orchestrator. So now that we know what it is and why we use it, let's see the use cases specifically for SD-WAN, right? In our context here. So mostly we're gonna see APIs being used to integrate with existing systems, right? So before they would be gathering information from servers or network devices using, you know, the old SNMP, NetFlows, or log into it and etc. Now you have an easy way to get that information with an API. And one example we have here is, for example, Splunk, where we develop a custom app that actually periodically talks to the orchestrator, so it leverages a client API running in Splunk, and can actually take all the events and outputs from the logs, and that makes the consumption very easy for customers that are used to, well, they have Splunk in their place. Another use would be custom user portals, right? So everything that sits in our GUI can actually be retrieved via API. So if a partner is already offering a custom portal for their customers, they're used to that format and how things look and feel, they can actually use the API, get the information from the API and feed into that same portal, right? They don't need to use our portal because you basically can get everything from it. Another typical use case would be custom reporting, right? If you need something, I don't know, how many edges were activated or how much bandwidth it's being utilized, you can pull that information into a reporting app that will generate that for the customer. But for the most, and that's my use, it's typically for automation, right? When I need to perform high volume tasks. If I need to, for example, a standard firewall. This is something I've done for a couple of customers. They have the existing network of firewall rules, and they need those converted into VeloCloud or our fire rules in the edge. And that would be very, very hard to do if you have like hundreds of ACL entries like I had and try to go through the GUI and click around. It would be very painful. And with an API, it was just basically get the format and click. It was done. And those you can repeat for firewalls, static routes, anything that is high volume configuration. You could use it to do small feature enhancement. Let's say today we don't have time-based policies, right? So you could actually make API calls, put this into a script that applies business policies and revert them in a certain time. So this can easily be done. And other examples like getting configuration, comparing, etc. I added further slides here of how that looks. I'm not gonna go through it. This is different tools using it, Power BI, etc. Let's take a look a bit more deep into the VMware API methods. So what is a method? It's basically a resource and an action that is going to be applied to this resource. So it's all, the format is usually, as you can see, a resource with a category / action. So the resources in our context could be in a configuration, could be in edges or an enterprise events, etc. And the action will be creating one of those, reading, updating, or even deleting it. So before you can actually use the orchestrator, we need to authenticate, right? And obviously the main reason for this is that each method is going to be available for what privilege that user has. So not all the methods are available for all users. So in this example here, I try to run a method, this get enterprise, as an enterprise user, but this was only available for an operator or super user. So you get that kind of error message. So anyway, once you authenticate, you're gonna get a session cookie, and you can use that for further requests, right? So you just save that, and that cookie is gonna be available for you 24 hours, and you can just reuse it in your next day. You don't have to authenticate for every single request. Anyway, so how do I know? How do I learn more? What are the methods available? What is the format they should have? What are the mandatory fields? We have inside the Code VMware repository our API Explorer. So you can just browse to this URL I gave you here and go through it. And on top of that, what we really have here that is extremely helpful for who's starting is this tab here, related code samples. So here we have engineers and pre-sales engineers posting their examples and their clients of multiple examples of interacting with the VCO. I have the first one here, this Python, which is quite powerful, and I think we might even talk about it in another API session. So just a short example how that would look like inside the Explorer. I just picked this example here because it's straightforward, like edge provision. So if I need to provision an edge, I would use this method. So edge provision and the resource is edge. Here you can see that you need those privileges. And what I wanted to show here is inside the body, what's the model number, right? If I need to know how to format the model number to provision an edge, I'll just go look for the string here. This was running 322, if I'm not mistaken. Now you see more like the edge 3000 and so on. All right, so let's make it a bit more interesting, see how can we actually follow the orchestrator GUI. But before we do that, I would like to take just a really 10,000-foot high-level overview of the orchestrator architecture in regards to the API, right? So in a nutshell, the orchestrator is a virtual machine that is front-ended by Nginx here web server. And from here, you're going to get the communication from edges, from gateways, as well as the GUI, right? So if you're using a browser, command line tool, or API applications, you're going to be talking to that Nginx first. So, but actually what happens, and this is the very interesting part of our architecture, is that every request that comes through the GUI is actually translated into an API call to this backend service called portal. So all the configurations and that you're going to be applying, retrieving actually in the portal. So it makes things quite simple because really every action you do in the browser corresponds to an API call. So this is basically built in. And before we go into that, I'll just very short here. This is probably for more relevant for people that already have a bit of REST API experience, just to see the difference between our API and well, maybe I can call it typical API. So typically in a REST API, you would have what you see here at the bottom. REST API call will be a URL/method and parameters. And in our API, what we typically do is just make a call to the URL portal, and inside the body, we actually have the method described in the parameters. It makes it make it easy actually to wrap those JSON-RPC calls, because that's actually the language you use to communicate between our devices, right? All right, I added some extra slides here for reference when we get the PDF itself, but I would like to now just jump in straight into the GUI, make it a bit more interesting. So I have this orchestrator here just to test right now. What I want to show you is the developer tools from Chrome, right? I'm pretty sure other browsers also have this ability or capability. And if you're not familiar, so this developer tools is quite useful to understanding how web pages work, what the requests are being made. So for example, let's say I just load this entire page here. You're gonna see in this network tab every single object that was retrieved and what requests that look like. So I'm talking about everything that was used to build this page. But for us, what's important, as I said, it's what's behind the portal. So all the portal requests. So let me show you what I meant when I said everything you do in the GUI translates into a request to the portal as an API. Let's pick an example here. Let's build a new edge, right? It's a simple task, new edge. Let's pick a model, edge 2000, and use this profile here. Let me clear and create. So as you can see here on the side, and let me know if it's not very well readable. So this developer tool helps you really understand exactly what was done. So as I said, we have this request, which is the VCO IP/portal, and it was a post. As I previously mentioned, everything we do is always a post. We got a 200, okay, and inside the payload, it's actually what you need to provision an edge. So here it sees this JSON-RPC, and the method was edge provision. Here again, the model number edge 1000 QAT. It's curiously enough not edge 2000, but that's how it's written. And so you can actually exactly see. So okay, what if I need to? How do I actually provision an edge using API? Google Chrome gives you something really cool, which is you can just right-click here, copy this request as a CURL or curl, So if I copy this and I paste here on a text file, let's say this one here, you're going to see the entire request being made here. So I could potentially come here and change some parameters and just repeat the request. So for example, if I delete this edge, and before I do that, let me clear, delete. And now you know how to delete an edge, right? All you need is the enterprise ID and the edge ID. So that's delete. So now let's get that URL, and I've done that here a few times, but let me just paste it here, the same URL. So I copy this request that I done on the GUI that the Chrome gave to me, and I can just repeat this. And after, if everything goes well, I go back here, I have my edge. So basically I can just either change and create new edges or put this in a script and run this 100 times. And that would be the same for anything else, creating profiles, routings, anything. So it's kind of easy to follow, right? You just need to understand what's mandatory, what's not, choose the parameters you need to change, and there we go. That all works as well for the monitoring part, right? This is just for the provisioning part, but if you need like to get events, and so how do I pull the events? You would see here, you would get the edge lists, and then you get the enterprise events. And same thing for really anything else you do here, even on the test and remote diagnostic and so on. All right, so that covers the browser part. Let's go back to here. One thing very shortly before I do that, it's just going on here. You're gonna see that you typically when you're doing in tasks like this, you're applying the API to a specific customer or edge, and you can find the edge ID very easily here on the URL, right? So, well, coincidentally, I only have one customer, so the ID is number 1. So if you need to know what's the enterprise ID I'm gonna apply, which is always mostly is there in the request, you can easily find it on the browser. You can also use it with the edge, or actually with an API call, and I'll show you that as well. Let's go back to the presentation then. Focus on the second part. All right, so what I would like to do next is show you how to interact with the orchestrator using Postman. And why Postman, right? First of all, it's free and it's easy to use. So for those of you that are not familiar with Postman, it started as it used to be a plugin in Chrome. For a long time, I myself call it I thought it belonged to Google, but it's not really. It was just a plugin that got so well known and used, and now developed into a standalone application, which now has a huge community. And people are not only using this to assist in testing or trying APIs, but also even in production, really using it. And in my previous life here before this, I was also doing some other SD-WAN, and I had many customers, really, especially the network guys that they're not yet a DevOps. They like this tool a lot. And we do have a command line version of it, which is called Newman, for those of you that know Seinfeld. And you can actually use that as, it's easy to apply this in a Chrome job and make things more programmatically, I would say. And it's very easy. It's safe history. It makes the use of the API in the test extremely useful. And it not only does API calls, it has JavaScript inside. So you can pre-process information, send a request, get the output, process that output, and feed into the next request. So you can really program it. That's pretty cool. So anyway, I got again some slides that is more for reference later. This is the one I was showing you where you can figure out the enterprise ID and the edge ID. Just one example here again, how you would use, and this one I want to mention. So here I use that enterprise ID into the request. So the method is enterprise get enterprise addresses. And these addresses are actually commonly asked by customers, hey, so give me the list of gateways that are available to me. If you actually post this, you would get this list. So the first IP will be the VCO, and then you have all your gateways that are associated with that customer pool. All right, so I made available a Postman collection, which is another cool thing about Postman, right? You can get all your requests in a sequence and make a collection out of it, share, and versioning, etc. So I make this collection available in those examples I mentioned before, and this one is using a data file. So actually, it's gonna use variables inside Postman, which is gonna be read from a CSV file. So just you can see here on the top, you're going to have the variable names, enterprise profile, and Postman will interact in all those lines through all these requests in the collection. So in this one, we're going to be basically logging as an enterprise, create a new profile. I'm going to change this profile a little bit, change the VLAN 1, create an edge access file rule to allow the edge to be accessed via the gateways. And in the end, I'm going to provision it. And you can see here how it looks in the example. I had a slide here how you would go about setting this up. So you basically install Postman, download the collection, and create a new environment. Environments like predefined variables you're gonna have for that can be used in when you're running it. So here mandatory be the URL or the IP of the VCO and a username, right? And then you might need to use an operator or enterprise. And again, the file that's gonna be inputting the variables. And this is for reference. Let's just go ahead and go straight into Postman. So this is the Postman I have. This is one of the collections. Just very short here, as you can see, everything here makes life easy in terms of API, right? You can define which method it's going to use. For us, is always post. You have the URL, and then you have the body here where you're going to define what's going to be sent. And it gives us a lot of tools, right? You can choose if it's JSON, you can choose here it's going to format, you can beautify. You don't need another tool to do this for you. And as you can see, this double curly brackets here are actually variables, right? Which I'm going to read from my environment. So I have this environment here, and you need that when you're running it. So again, just going short through it here. The first thing I'll do is get the enterprise ID. So in the file I'm going to be reading, I only have the customer name. You don't need to figure out the ID. The API will do that for you. So it will read this customer ID, make a request for all the enterprises. And as I said, you can use a Java to process that response and figure out the enterprise ID based on that name that is written here. So once you have that, it's going to create a new profile and get the profile ID, the modules ID, and everything. And it's going to replace the VLAN 1 with some information. And again, you can have these requests be pre-processed and processed after. So here's the edge file rule I'm adding. I allow this IP, and I feed this into a new file data, and so on. That's extremely powerful here. Let's go ahead and give it a try. So to actually give it a try, we have this runner, right? So we can run collections. So we select the collection, and then you have all the requests inside the collection. You can choose to skip one, just, I don't know. If you don't want to do the VLAN change, you just unmark it and you can run this. You pick an environment, select the data file you want to use, and the format can be CSV or JSON file, and you can actually preview it to see if everything is as you expected. So variable names and the things you're going to add. So I'm going to add 2 profiles and 5 edges as a virtual edge. So let's just go back shortly here to my VCO. Right now, I only have this simple profile and this here, which I'm going to clean it up. And all right, so back to Chrome. So before you run it, there's another cool thing about Postman is this console, which actually helps a lot in troubleshooting and fully understanding what's your calls or exactly how they look like. So let's just run here, and if everything goes well, it should interact for 5 of those, right? The 5 lines I have. and built for me 2 new profiles and 5 new edges. Let me close this now. We need that. All right, so, and as you can see, if I go to the firewall rules now, I have this modified for me. And if I go here to the device level, I have this IP in my VLAN 1, which you kind of, it's mandatory to have an IP in every VLAN, right? That's why I'm doing this. And I go back to my edges, I got my 5 edges. And that's basically it, right? Just want to even activate it as HA. And now if I look at my console, I can see all the requests being done. And the reason you're gonna see a notice this here, this one actually has a REST. So this is actually a REST formatted call. And you can see that when you look at the body, it's just username and password, right? While when you look in the last one here, in the provisional one, as I said, it's just a simple call to portal, and inside the body, it's where we have everything. And look how easily this formats things for you, right? You can actually just click around and see exactly how this is formatted, and you can get that. So this is basically all you need to provision an edge. This ID is the profile ID. That's why this request here gets the profile ID. So extremely powerful to troubleshoot, and to automate, and to learn how to use this. Another thing I want to show you, for example, so this is this is how the the Postman would send it, but you actually can save this. Not save it, actually I want to show you the code. You can translate this into different languages, actually. It's pretty cool. So what if I want to do this with Python? It can actually give you this how-to right here. So you can see you're going to have HTTP import, and you have the headers, and here's the connect. So really, for a non-developer, I think this is the best tool you can have.